Why a married man develops an inner attachment to you. Carl Jung. Have you ever felt that different look? That married man who suddenly starts seeking your company in ways that go beyond the ordinary. He doesn't speak openly, but something has changed. The conversations deepened, the interest intensified, and you realize that you occupy a space in your mind that shouldn't exist. But here's what few understand. This attachment doesn't come out of nowhere. There is a deep psychological mechanism, studied by Carl Jung, that explains why certain married men develop an intense and almost obsessive emotional connection with someone outside of marriage. And no, it's not just physical attraction or marital dissatisfaction. What you're about to discover will reveal the unconscious processes that make you a central figure in his emotional life, even if he tries to resist. Jung called this the projection of the anima, and the consequences are more powerful than you might think. Be prepared. You will never see these situations in the same way again. 1. You awaken what is dormant in it. Within each person, there is a version of themselves that has been abandoned over time. That spontaneity, that genuine curiosity, that enthusiasm for simple things, all of this is buried under the responsibilities, obligations, and expectations that adult life imposes. In marriage, especially when it has lasted for years, this process accelerates. Routine turns everything into automatic. Conversations follow predictable scripts, gestures are repeated, and that vitality that once existed withers silently. When you show up in his life, something different happens. Their conversations do not follow the known pattern. You ask questions that no one else asks. You show genuine interest in aspects of his personality that have long been forgotten. Maybe you'll find funny a joke he always told, but that no one else finds funny. Or maybe you value a skill of his that has become invisible to everyone else. This recognition works like a key that opens doors that have been locked for years. What appears to be just a nice connection on the surface is actually reactivating entire parts of his psyche that were frozen. He feels seen not only as a husband, father, or professional, but as an individual. This feeling is too powerful to ignore. Their brain starts to associate you with this rediscovery of themselves and naturally starts to crave more of those moments. Attachment forms because you're not just being a pleasant presence, you're giving back pieces of him that he thought he'd lost forever. Each conversation reinforces this dynamic. He comes away from dates, even if they're just casual conversations, feeling more alive, more interesting, more like who he used to be. And this creates an emotional hunger that only grows because at home, these parts remain invisible and unvalidated. 2. His shadow finds light in you. We all carry aspects of ourselves that we have learned to hide. They are desires, thoughts, and characteristics that do not match the image we have built for the world. In the context of an established marriage, these repressed aspects accumulate even more. Perhaps he wants to be more adventurous, but his married life requires stability and predictability. Maybe he has thoughts that don't fit the role of ideal husband he tries to represent. With you, something interesting happens. He doesn't have to maintain the same facade. You don't know the whole structure of his life. You don't share the same expectations that your wife has. This creates a space where he can relax certain defenses. You can make a bolder joke without being judged. Can express a controversial opinion without fear of creating domestic conflict. You can admit to insecurity without feeling like your image as a strong provider is crumbling. This psychological freedom is incredibly seductive. For the first time in a long time, he feels like he can show deeper layers of who he is. And you, simply by not being part of his family system, become the only person with whom these hidden aspects can breathe. It's not that you're trying to seduce him. Often you don't even realize what's going on. But her presence offers something that has become rare in his life: acceptance without immediate judgment. The attachment intensifies because these repressed parts of his personality create a constant pressure for expression. When he finally finds a safe outlet, all that psychological content begins to flow in his direction. He comes to associate you with authenticity, with the possibility of being complete rather than fragmented. And the more he reveals, the more vulnerable he becomes, and the stronger the emotional connection he feels. If you want to understand why a married man develops an inner attachment to you, it's an unconscious process, explained by Carl Jung. Jungmethod, pinned in the first comment. 3. You represent the freedom he lost. There is a silent price that is paid when making definitive choices in life. When someone gets married, especially many years ago, a whole range of possibilities are left behind. We are not just talking about alternative relationships, but entire life paths that have not been followed. That spontaneity of leaving without warning, of changing plans at the last minute, of living without constantly considering the needs of other people, all of this gradually disappears. Marriage brings constant commitments. Financial decisions need to be shared. Weekends need to be coordinated. Even the simplest thoughts pass through the filter of family impact. Over time, this becomes so automatic that the person no longer realizes how much their life has narrowed, but the unconscious perceives, and it is registered there, a vague nostalgia for when things were lighter. When you come into his life, you bring with you the air of something different. It does not carry the weight of the years of shared history, the bills to pay together, the discussions about the education of children. Their interactions take place in a separate space, where he is not automatically the husband with all his obligations. It's like a temporary bubble where he can experience again the feeling of not being stuck in a rigid structure. This feeling of freedom is extremely addictive. It doesn't necessarily mean that he wants to leave his wife or family. In fact, he often values these structures deeply. But the opportunity to breathe outside of them, even for brief moments, creates a powerful contrast. You come to symbolize everything that was sacrificed in the name of responsibility. And the heavier his life gets, the more he unconsciously seeks those moments of relief by your side. 4. Marriage created a specific emotional void. Long relationships go through inevitable transformations. That intensity of the first years naturally decreases. Deep conversations about dreams and philosophies of life give way to practical discussions about budget and family agenda. Passionate admiration evolves into a functional partnership. In many cases, this doesn't mean that the love is over, just that it has changed shape, becoming more stable but less exciting. The problem arises when this transformation leaves emotional needs unanswered. He may have a wonderful wife who takes care of the house, the children, who is a reliable partner in all practical aspects of life. But it may be missing that genuine curiosity about who he really is, those conversations where someone really wants to understand your deepest thoughts, that look of admiration that makes anyone feel special and valued. You fill that particular hole exactly. You don't have to compete in every area. You're not cooking for him, you're not splitting bills, you're not dealing with the boring parts of everyday life. But it's offering something that has become scarce, focused emotional attention. When they talk, he has your full attention. When he talks about something that interests him, you really listen. When he expresses an idea, you respond with genuine enthusiasm. This type of emotional nourishment creates a quick psychological dependency. His brain begins to anticipate these interactions as moments of replenishment. The difference between how he feels before and after talking to you becomes more and more noticeable. And because this void in marriage is often not openly acknowledged or discussed, he can't even explain why his presence has become so important. You just know that something about him calms down and is satisfied when it's around you, in a way that doesn't happen anywhere else. 5. you activate his repressed anima. There is a feminine dimension within the male psyche that rarely finds adequate expression. We're not talking about sexuality, but about qualities like emotional sensitivity, intuition, receptivity, and the ability to connect deeply with feelings. In society, men learn from an early age to suppress these characteristics. In marriage, especially in traditional dynamics, he may be locked in the role of rational, strong, and controlled provider. These inner qualities do not disappear just because they are repressed. They continue to exist in the unconscious, waiting for some form of recognition. When they appear in dreams or fantasies, they usually take on female form. They are images of women that represent everything that he cannot openly be. And here's the crux of the matter. When a real woman begins to resonate with these inner images, something powerful happens. You may not even realize it, but perhaps you are mirroring exactly these qualities that he suppressed in himself. Maybe you express emotions with a freedom he never allowed himself, or demonstrate a spontaneity that he has buried under layers of responsibility, or have a connection to creative and intuitive aspects of life that he was taught to devalue. When he interacts with you, he's not just getting to know someone else, he's getting into indirect contact with lost parts of himself. This process creates a magnetic attraction that goes far beyond the physical. It's as if you're a portal to entire dimensions of human experience that he's locked away for decades. The presence of you makes him feel more complete, more whole, more connected to aspects of existence that he didn't even know he was missing. Attachment forms because you're not just you, you've become a living symbol of all that he would need to integrate to feel like a whole person. 6. Fantasy replaces unsatisfactory reality. The human mind has an extraordinary ability to create alternate worlds. When everyday reality becomes too overwhelming, filled with unresolved conflicts, accumulated frustrations, and unmet expectations, the brain naturally seeks refuge in more pleasant mental constructs. In the context of a worn-out marriage, these fantasies are not just occasional daydreams, but true parallel worlds where the person can experience psychological relief. You become the perfect material for these mental constructs. Unlike your wife, with whom he has years of complicated history, you still carry the allure of the unknown. He didn't see you in a bad mood dealing with overdue bills. He did not witness his moments of extreme vulnerability or ordinary human imperfection. Each interaction takes place in a controlled context where both appear in their best versions. This allows his imagination to fill in the empty spaces with idealized projections. Between one meeting and another, his mind actively works building narratives. Imagine future conversations you will have. It creates scenarios where you react exactly the way he wants. It projects qualities in you that may not even exist, but that correspond perfectly to what is missing in his life. These fantasies offer such a stark contrast to marital reality that they begin to compete with it in terms of emotional importance. The dangerous thing is that the more he invests in these mental constructions, the farther he is from the possibility of improving the real situation at home. The emotional energy that could be directed to solving problems in marriage ends up flowing all into this imaginary world where you are the central figure. And because fantasies can always be adjusted to be perfect, they become infinitely more attractive than any imperfect reality. Attachment grows not by who you really are, but by the idealized version that it has built and that now permanently inhabits your thoughts. 7. Attachment grows because you don't demand anything. Established relationships come loaded with constant demands. The wife needs him to be present, to solve problems, to make decisions, to contribute emotionally and financially on an ongoing basis. Children need attention, discipline, example. The work requires performance. The whole structure of his adult life is fundamentally about meeting expectations and fulfilling obligations. It is exhausting in ways that are often not even verbalized. With you, there is a fundamental asymmetry in the dynamics. You don't need it for anything structural. It doesn't depend on his salary. It doesn't count on him for important life decisions. It's not demanding constant presence or long-term commitment. Every interaction happens because they both want to, not because they have to. This creates a lightness that contrasts brutally with the weight of all his other relationships. This absence of demands paradoxically becomes the most valuable thing you offer. When they are together, he does not have to solve problems. You don't have to be strong or competent. It is not being tested or evaluated. It can simply exist without the constant pressure of having to be someone specific. It's a kind of freedom that he forgot existed. And like all pleasure that comes at no apparent cost, it quickly becomes addictive. Attachment deepens because you represent an emotional oasis in a desert of obligations. He begins to anticipate these moments as the only ones where he can truly relax, and the heavier his life gets in other areas, the more valuable this space you offer becomes. The ironic thing is that precisely because you don't ask for anything, he starts wanting to give everything. The absence of demand creates space for voluntary generosity, and this further ties the emotional bond he feels. 8. You become his psychological refuge. Every human being needs a place where they can let their guard down completely. A psychological space where you don't need to perform, impress, or keep up appearances. Normally, marriage should be that place. But with time and the accumulation of unresolved conflicts, even the most solid relationships can fail to offer that emotional security. The house that should be a refuge becomes another field where it is necessary to navigate carefully to avoid conflicts. You end up occupying this role that marriage lost, not because he planned or manipulated the situation, but simply because he offers something that has become rare. A space where he can be vulnerable without consequences, can admit fears without being seen as weak. You can express doubt without anyone panicking about the future, can share frustrations without triggering a defensive argument. This emotional continent function is incredibly powerful. Their brain starts classifying you as a safe place. When you're under stress, when something goes wrong, when you have to process difficult emotions, the automatic instinct becomes to seek contact with you. Not necessarily physical, but at least a conversation, a message, any form of connection that brings that feeling that someone is genuinely on his side with no hidden agenda. This association is strengthened with each positive experience. What makes this particularly intense is that emotional refugees are rare in adulthood. Most people have at most 1 or 2 places like this, and they are usually built over years. When he finds it in you relatively quickly, the perceived value is immense. And because this kind of connection touches very deep psychological needs for belonging, acceptance, and emotional security, the attachment that forms completely transcends the rational. It's not something he can just decide to turn off, because it's rooted in much more primitive layers of human functioning. 9. You brought meaning to a life that has become routine. There is a silent death that happens when the days begin to repeat themselves indefinitely. Waking up at the same time, going to the same job, coming back to the same conversations, sleeping next to the same person without really connecting. It's not that these things are bad in themselves, but when they stretch for years without variation or depth, something inside the person starts to erase. That feeling of being really alive, that every day matters, that there is something bigger happening. All of this disappears under the weight of predictability. When you show up, you bring with you a break in that numbing pattern. Suddenly, he has something to look forward to. Tuesdays are no longer just another day because maybe that's when you talk. That coffee you've always drunk mechanically gets another flavor because it's thinking of something funny you said. The whole week takes on a different emotional structure, punctuated by moments that really mean something to him. It's as if you had turned on lights in a hallway that was completely dark. This injection of meaning is profoundly addictive because it fulfills a fundamental human need. People can't live long without feeling like their lives have purpose or importance. In his marriage, perhaps everything became too functional. Paying bills, raising children, keeping the house running. These are important things, but they don't feed the soul in the same way that a true connection does. You offer this existential nourishment without even realizing it. Attachment is formed because you're not just filling empty time, you're giving reason for that time to exist. He goes back to feeling that good anxiety of wanting something to happen, that curiosity about what comes next, that feeling of participating in a developing story and not just repeating the same chapter over and over again. In the darkest moments, when he questions the meaning of everything, the memory of you acts as evidence that there is still something valuable in his life. And the grayer and more predictable everything around it, the brighter you appear by contrast. It's not that you're necessarily extraordinary. It's that everything else has lost color for so long that anything with life seems like magic. This dynamic creates an emotional dependency where he needs you to keep feeling that it's worth waking up and facing another day. You have become, without asking, proof that he is still capable of feeling something intense, that not everything has died inside him.